Carolina. He's actually a colleague of Bart Ehrman, the same area.
Okay.
He's done another book on the Abrahamic religions. It's coming out in September, and once it's published next month, he wants to come in to talk about that. And there are a couple of female Muslim academics, one from London, one from the States. The one from the States just published a book, Oxford University Press, on women in the Quran, and there's the London Sheikhina, I forget the female version of Sheikh. What's that in Arabic? Sheikha, that's the word.
Right.
Sheikha, she's based here, and she's a proper Islamic scholar.
Okay.
She's definitely coming on. I'm not quite sure when, but I wanted to talk about Islam and feminism. This whole thorny issue of gender relations in the Bible, in the Quran, I mean.
It might be worth contacting another lady. She's teaching in the US. Her name is Asma Saeed, and she has written about the role of Muslim women in transmitting hadith knowledge in particular.
Right, that's interesting. Yeah.
And she has covered, if I'm not mistaken, the history of about 8 centuries. So she talks about the early period, the 2nd and the 3rd century, and then she talks about the later period. I think she does address the Ottomans as well.
Yeah.
So she's a very interesting person to talk to as well.
Another one is Usman Sheikh, who you know, a friend of ours. He's just finished postgraduate, studies at Oxford, and I've just read his thesis. I think it's sent it to many people, and absolutely fascinating. I mean, he quotes, he goes to task with Christian scholars like Andy Bannister, who's also connected with Oxford University. Because Banner, in his latest work on do Christians and Muslims worship the same God, and the answer is no in his view. But he said one of the reasons is that Muslims believe, the Quran talks about a remote, transcendent God who's all-powerful and all-knowing, but not a God of love, not a God of mercy. And I was reading this and I thought, what is he talking about? And indeed, the professor at Oxford who supervised Usman Sheikh's research, when he read Andy Bannister's book, couldn't believe what he was reading. This Oxford professor is an expert in the field and thought this is all wrong. And so part of Usman Sheikh's thesis is to refute this, which is good, because Andy Bannister has quite a prominent role in Christian apologetics, I think, particularly because of his connections with Oxford. And yet what he's producing would seem to be of extraordinarily questionable quality, to put it diplomatically. And what Usman Sheikh did, and I like this, he quoted E.P. Saunders. E.P. Saunders is the great Christian biblical scholar who helped to introduce to Western scholarship a true accurate understanding of Judaism, because we used to think in the West that Jews were like Muslims, it's all salvation by works. There's not a loving God. There's no grace. Christians believe in God of grace. Jews don't, and he helped to obviously deal with that, but in a very academic way in the 80s and 90s. So now Western scholarship has
Jesus and Jews.
Yes, many books he's written.
E.P. Saunders, one of his...
absolutely, he's still alive actually, an American scholar. And so
is he British or...?
No, he's American. He was a professor at Oxford, but he's also at Yale and all sorts of places.
Okay.
He's still alive. I say he's still alive. He's very elderly now. So what he and Usman Sheikh quotes E.P. Saunders' critique of the distorted understanding we have in the West of Judaism as a parallel, an analogue to how Western Christian missionary scholars are still treating Islam, because we need to do the same for Islam that we did for Judaism. In other words, to have an accurate, objective understanding and not come out with these tired tropes that there isn't a God of love in Islam, which is obviously not true. And he does that really well, Usman Sheikh, in his thesis, and a few other Christian scholars as well. Now, I must say that many Christian scholars in the West now, particularly at Cambridge, do have a good understanding of Islam, a proper understanding, like David Ford, who's Professor of Divinity at Oxford, at Cambridge, who's a Christian, and he has a very nuanced and sophisticated understanding of the Quran. But some others, particularly evangelical Christian scholars like Andy Bannister, don't. And they're publishing now and saying the same stuff even today, and I was really shocked when I read it.
You think that theology blinds them?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it is.
So scholarship means nothing in their case?
I don't know what it is. They have a kind of theological apparatus. When they look at they think, well, Christianity is a God of grace. Islam obviously doesn't, because if it did, that would be Christianity, because we believe that. So Islam must teach something else or something. But of course, they can't see the elephant in the room, which is the truth, and that's not the truth they believe. So,
I mean, I've seen this repeatedly with many evangelical scholars that for some reason they fail to see anything positive in Islam, for that matter. I mean, forget about God, anything positive.
Anything.
They struggle to see anything positive.
Yes.
And this is where the academic credentials are questioned. They become questionable. I mean,
it does.
Come on, people are not
it does.
People,
I know. You're right.
We have read people like Giza Vermes, let's say, E.P. Saunders you mentioned, James D.G. Dunn, people like that. I mean, of course, these people haven't written on Islam. As such. But those who are writing on Islam, they just simply cannot come around the evangelical outlook on Islam. They just simply can't abandon it.
And so it's interesting, other Christian groups, like the Catholic scholarship now, a lot of Catholic scholarship is much more nuanced and sophisticated, almost very positive towards Islam. I think it's because of the Second Vatican Council, where the Church had a complete change in outlook vis-a-vis the other religions. And the Second Vatican Council has texts which say very positive things about Islam. And so the tradition is set now that they do that. And that's the biggest church in the world. The evangelicals haven't caught up, and they're still living in outdated Orientalist missionary paradigms from the 19th century. And what's shocking is that Andy Bannister, who is a young scholar connected with Oxford University, is producing stuff even now that is read by evangelicals, which is misinforming them. I mean, on a factual basis, misinforming them.
This is the problem with a lot of evangelical Christians around the world. They focus on these scholars, and they don't read around. They don't look at other scholars. These scholars, because they tend to support, or they appear to be supporting their narrative on Islam, they really focus on them, and they don't read.
And I know, Adanan, I think I know why. Because when I was an evangelical Christian, I read evangelical. In my own mind, I'm sure it's true of everyone else, you want to read other authors who share your love for Jesus and who have that evangelical spirit. You trust them because they know the light, they know the truth, because they're good.
I think we have this
Jesus
problem with
loving
Muslims as well.
Yeah,
to be fair, we have this problem with Muslims as well.
And so you read him and think, well, of course, if he's a good evangelical, he's going to be a God-fearing, honest person and tell me the truth about Islam or anything else. But that's not the case, because, well, obviously, and you were talking about Islam. Yes, I agree.
To be fair, we have this problem with the Muslims as well. They like to read the scholars they trust.
Yes, exactly. Trust. It's all about trust. They trust Andy Bannister because he's an evangelical scholar. But the fact is, he's not telling them the truth, and that's the problem. And you need to read outside of the box to get a balanced view, and that's difficult because you're moving out of your comfort zone to people who are not Christians or whatever. And that's more problematic because then you've got to assess their arguments, not whether you trust them because they love the Lord like you do. You've got to engage the mind more, and that's harder work.
And they rely on them heavily. I mean, there are some recent names I can mention in this regard. People who have written on Islam and things Islamic. Gordon Nicol. He has written a book on Muslim view in the Bible. And evangelicals love him. And they like
he's Richard. What's his surname? His favourite. He's scholar at Oxford. Richard Zeta, who comes here. He finished his postgraduate studies at Oxford. He's his supervisor at Oxford when he was at Oxford. So he does. He's promoting that.
There is Gabriel Reynolds.
Oh yes, in the he's Catholic.
Also, I don't know if he's Catholic.
No, Roman Catholic.
Even his works are quoted heavily by evangelicals.
He's quite active on Twitter. I follow him on Twitter. Actually. Yes.
Amazingly, a lot of these people, they don't really care about their academic credentials. I mean,
I think Gabriel, he would, but
he's teaching at Notre Dame, right?
Yes. Usman Sheikh does engage with this whole question of whether or not the Quran endorses the Bible. He offers a very sophisticated, which I haven't read it all yet, anyway, analysis of how the Quran interacts in his thesis. Sorry, which Usman Sheikh will be talking about.
Is this a PhD thesis or a master's thesis?
It's a master's. He will be talking about this on Blogging Theology soon. I can't remember if we got a date or not. Yeah, we have got a date in September. And he's a very subtle analysis of how the Quran corrects and amends the biblical narrative in very distinctive and recognizable ways. So it's unthinkable that it should be endorsing the Bible. It has a very pointed interaction with the narratives and removing certain issues.
There are subtleties in the Quran.
Yes.
They are absolutely mind-blowing. I'll give you one. I don't know if you come across this one. The name of John the Baptist.
No.
Apparently, it's a mistake in the Quran. He is called Yahya.
Right. Well, I'm not sure how that's a mistake because that's his name. But anyway.
You see, no, this is my theory on it.
Right. Okay.
It's a very interesting
In bloody 1 week.
way of looking at
They
it.
said to America,
Yahya is actually a Hebrew word, Jahiyya or Yahiyya, right? It is only used once in the entire text of the Bible. In the Old Testament, Jahiyya was a priest in the temple.
Right.
Okay? And the word means God gives life. Right? So the Quran says that no one was given this name before. Right? So the Christians claim, oh, this name basically is not the name of John the Baptist. His name was John, which is in Hebrew Yohanan, okay, or Yohanna in the Arabic language.
Yeah.
Right? That's his proper name. That's his proper noun. John, Yohanna or Yohanan. Right? Yahya isn't. But when you read the Quran, Quran explains that John was born of a barren woman. She was, his birth was also a miraculous birth in the sense that his mother was barren. And the word is Akir in the Arabic language, right? So the term Yahya is a title used for him rather than his proper name, right? Because Yahya means God gives life.
Oh, I see.
God gives life even from a barren. Okay, and when you read the tafsir literature, some commentators actually explain that. But hold on a second, there is something very subtle in the same chapter about John the Baptist. And what is that? When you go to verse 13, Allah uses a term for John, for Yahya, which is not used for anyone else in the Quran, and it is used only once in the entire text of the Quran. And that term is Hanan. The term is Hanan, Hananu min ladunna. And it means that he is, I forgot the meaning of Hanan. It is, I think, something like mercy or a present or a gift. Okay, Hananu min ladunna, that he is a present or a gift from us, right? Now, the term Hanan is exactly the same word as Yohanan and Yohanna and John. When you look at the root words, because these are Semitic languages, Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic, so the root word is exactly the same. Hanana. The term is Hanana, right? And it is only used once in the Quran. It is only used in reference to John the Baptist, Yahya. So it is as if the term or the name or the proper name of John the Baptist or Yahya was coded within the same chapter where it talks about not calling him John. I mean, the Quran doesn't call him John or Yohanan or Yohanna, but the term is used for him, specifically for him, for no one else in the entire text of the Quran. So Yahya is a title and his proper name is there also. Now tell me Muhammad was planning all this and making all this up. He was a theologian par excellence who knew Hebrew, he knew all the subtleties of the languages.
He was a great scholar with a huge library, and even though he couldn't...
Absolutely. So this is one of those subtleties, which is absolutely mind-blowing.
And another one that's been pointed out by a Western scholar, I forget her name, one of the, I forget it was Angelica Newith or the other lady, about the name of the first followers of Jesus. You'd expect an Arab to refer to them as Christians, because that's what you'd think. The first followers of Jesus were Christians, weren't they? But actually, he uses the word Nazarene, or they're Nazarite. Nasara, that's the word.
Nasara is basically, scholars claim it means Nazarenes.
Exactly.
So, or Hawariyun. Hawariyun, basically another term used for the followers of Jesus, is the supporters. Right. The supporters. They are the supporters, right?
But to call him a Nazarene is a very specifically historically accurate title or name, which you wouldn't expect someone to know.
Yes.
You call them Christians, not Nazarenes, which is actually correct. Jesus was called, his disciples were called that as well at that time.
So then they're not argued that Nazarenes was a term widely known in Arabia for the Christians at the time of Muhammad. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but don't you think they can come?
The author, she said that is a rather obscure term that would not have been an obvious term to
Right,
use. That was
right,
her argument. It wasn't
right.
evident from
Because-
that context that word would have been used.
Mostly people around Arabia were Nestorians and Monophysites and Orthodox Christians in Syria.
Yeah.
These are the main Christians.
Yeah,
that
so there are
surrounded-
many names they could have been called, but to call them
Yeah.
by that historically specific name, which is actually accurate, is very surprising for a 7th century shepherd stroke businessman stroke.
And there are other things as well,
you know,
Paul.
to-
There are
to
so
believe-
many
to know
other
that.
things.
Yeah.
For example, if you look at the example of the Pharaoh,
Oh, that one,
Right.
yeah.
his body being preserved.
Yeah.
A lot of people overlook a very important nuance here, and that is that Allah only talks about Pharaoh when it comes to preserving of the body. He doesn't talk about other kings like that. There are other kings who are mentioned. The king of Abraham. Abraham was dealing with the king who's mentioned, the dialogue is mentioned. He's not Nimrod, by the way. A lot of people actually claim that's Nimrod. That's anachronism, by the way. Nimrod was a later title given to Babylonian and Assyrian kings.
And appears in Genesis, of course.
And amazingly, the Quran doesn't call him Nimrod.
No.
When it comes to Pharaoh, he's called Pharaoh. But the king of Abraham, who happened to be maybe perhaps a Mesopotamian, early Mesopotamian king, he's not Nimrod. Nimrod was a later title, and I think Nimrod is a title borrowed from Judeo-Christian literature.
Right.
It is not...
So Israelite rather than...
it's from the Israeliyat, absolutely. But here, there is something very subtle here. Pharaoh's body will be preserved, as if we are being told that they are getting mummified. Only the Egyptians had pioneered mummification of their royal personnel to that level. I mean, we don't find, we do have mummifications in other cultures as well. We do find mummies of important people in other cultures, but not to that level, not to that magnitude. How the Egyptians had taken it to the next level, to an extent that they were actually transporting this to other cultures. Even Alexander's body was mummified.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. Egyptian priests were brought from Egypt to Babylon. They mummified his body, and his body was put into a coffin, a giant coffin, or
sarcophagus.
Yeah, and then it was transported. And then Ptolemy decided to confiscate it. It was on its way back to Macedonia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ptolemy in Egypt, they decided to confiscate it, and the body was put in Alexandria, and it remained until the Roman period. The actual body of Alexander remained until the Roman period, and then there was I don't know what happened. There was an earthquake or something like that. I don't remember the details. I read about it a while back, and then the body was lost forever. And this is in the Roman period when the Romans. So this was Alexandria. So mummification was a business that Egyptians pioneered, and Allah specifically mentions that about Pharaoh, that your body will be preserved for posterity to look at and take lessons. These are some of these, these subtleties. This is fine, big things. People can say, oh, they were borrowed. The stories were borrowed, and they were changed, and they were twisted, and then they were put in this way in the Quran. But what about the subtleties? And there are so many. By the way, there is a book written, it's in Arabic. Sheikh Muhammad knows the title. It talks about these subtleties in the Quran. Some of them are absolutely mind-blowing. You can't think.
Well, maybe you can come on Bong in Theology and talk about those as well.
Maybe we can. Let me look into it.
Yeah.
I'll make a list of maybe 10 most important subtleties in the Quran that could not have come from an Arabian shepherd, let's say, right? And these subtleties are very, very important for us to consider. Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. Let's do that.
All right. Well, of course. I forgot. Sorry.
Because I don't want to keep using sanitizer.
No, of course.
So we're shaking so many hands here. So you end up.
I have sanitizer if anyone.
Huh?
I have sanitizer.
Sorry? Or shall we have no handshake?
Something written on the side.
Paul, very nice talking to you.
And you too. We'll talk again. We'll stay in touch.
Have a good holiday back in London, as long as you're here. And then you're going back to France.
Yeah, on Friday, but I'm back on, as you know, for something else on the 1st, and I'm here for a while, as long as I want to, basically.
Okay.
But I've got projects.
Are you planning to put up your conversations here on Blogging Theology? You might as well do that. If you have any good conversations.
Oh, well, you see. Well, if anyone films them, yeah. We'll see. But we'll see. Actually, I don't want to kind of commit myself. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you end up having a good conversation with someone, it can go on Walking Theology. Why not? I mean, I don't usually do that. I don't put my Speaker's Corner stuff.
No.
Generally speaking, on my channel.
It's got to fit in with the other.
Yeah,
So it can't just be any old.
But sometimes if it's a good conversation, and
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see who turns
yeah,
up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
cool.
But nice to see you, man.
And you
And
too.
I wanted to tell you. I don't know what these guys. They're gone. Yeah, and you're doing amazing work. Just continue. I mean, I always talk to brothers and.
Thank you.